In the last module, we saw that the seemingly discordant notions of philosophy that we find in Perry and his co-authors and Russell, on the other hand, actually approach the subject matter of philosophy from slightly different perspectives, but articulate the same general goals, the goals of creating, crafting, and evaluating a consistent, comprehensive, and systematic worldview. I want to emphasize one other commonality between Perry and his co-authors and Russell, and that can be found in this quote from page 3. We can never fully escape the limitations of our vision that result from the particular time and place we live. But through reading and thinking, we can examine and challenge ideas that seem natural from our perspective, with ideas that come from quite different points of view. Those of our values and concepts that survive this process will be more truly our own. So the idea that they seem to be getting at here is that a lot of the components of our worldview are things that we have inherited to a greater or lesser degree without any real careful consideration, contemplation, or evaluation. And that by engaging in this philosophical enterprise of examining the components of our worldview, of evaluating them, of modifying or rejecting the ones that we find to be inadequate or inconsistent, we in fact craft a more rational, consistent, systematic worldview that is more our own, that defines who we are and gives us a sense of self in a way in which we didn't have without engaging in these activities. And I think we find a similar kind of sentiment in Russell as well. Remember when Russell summarizes his article on page 61, he tells his readers, philosophy is to be studied, not for the sake of any definite answers to its questions, since no definite answers can as a rule be known to be true, but rather for the sake of the questions themselves, because these questions enlarge our conception of what is possible, enrich our intellectual imagination, and diminish the dogmatic assurance which closes the mind against speculation. But above all, because through the greatness of the universe which philosophy contemplates, the mind is also rendered great and becomes capable of that union with the universe which constitutes its highest good. So I think we find in Russell at the beginning of the 20th century, and in Perry and his co-authors at the beginning of the 21st century, a common assessment that one of the primary values of engaging in the activity of philosophy is that it allows us to question, to step outside of our preconceived and largely unreflective worldview, examine it carefully, evaluate it, change it, reject it, do the things that make it our own, and thereby make our conception of ourselves, of our society, of the universe more completely consistent, systematic, comprehensive, and our own. This is a phenomenon that actually has an empirical basis. And so I'm going to switch over to a video by Dan Ariely that articulates or talks about a notion called default bias in psychology and economics.
So let's think about a few examples of decision illusions. This is my favorite plot in all of social science. It's a plot that shows some countries in Europe and how many people in these countries are interested in donating their organs after they pass away. Now, these are not the people who actually donate, because whether a desire to donate translates into real donation depends on how you die, what your family members want, and so on. But these are the people who are interested in it. Now, when you look at this plot, you see countries on the right that give a lot and countries on the left that give very little. And the question is why? Why do some countries give a lot and some countries give a little? And when I ask my students this question, they usually think it's about culture. After all, with regular gifts, you get to enjoy the act of gift giving. You get to give somebody a gift. You get to look at their appreciation in their eyes. With organ donations, not so much. You give it after you die to somebody anonymous. Or you could say maybe it's about culture, or maybe it's about the law, or maybe it's about religion. But mostly they think it's about caring about other people in your society. But here's the interesting thing. When you look at this list, you can see countries that we think about as very similar from a cultural, religious, legal perspective, behaving very differently. For example, Sweden is all the way on the right. Denmark is all the way on the left. Germany is in the left group. Austria is in the right group. Depending on where you are in the world, you either think of the UK and France as either similar or different. The closer you are, by the way, to those two countries, you think they're more different. But anyway, what you can see is that they are very different in terms of organ donation. And finally, the example I like the most to think about is the comparison between the Netherlands, Holland, and Belgium. Holland gives about 28%. Belgium gives almost 98%. Very similar countries. Now, what's interesting about this case is that the Netherlands got to 28% after huge effort. They mailed every citizen in the country a letter begging them to join the organ donation program. There was coverage on television. There was coverage in the radio. There was really lots of information out there. And we don't know how much it cost them, but you can imagine it was very, very expensive. And all it got them was 28%. What did Belgium do? By the way, I should tell you that Holland, the Netherlands, also did a reality TV show in which people who were about to die got to choose who they want to leave their organs to. It was very controversial, of course, and it went off the air rather quickly. But it clearly was a central focus of attention in the country. So anyway, so with all this effort, they got to 28%. You can ask yourself, what efforts did Belgium do? How much money did they spend on it? And the answer is they spend zero. They spend much, much, much less than the Netherlands. So what does explain the difference between the countries on the left and the countries on the right? It turns out it's one little thing, which is the enrollment form. And here's the secret to this whole thing. Some countries, like the countries on the left, have a form that says, check the box if you want to participate in the organ donation program. And what do people do when they see this form? They do nothing. They don't check the box and they don't join the program. These are the countries on the left. The countries on the right have a slightly different form. It says, check the box below if you don't want to participate in the organ donation program. And what do people do in this second case? They do the same exact thing. They don't check, but now they join. Now we call this opt-in and opt-out, and this is also a question of what is the default choice. And this is really kind of an amazing phenomenon, and because of that I think it's worthwhile spending a few minutes on this. So first of all, when we go around our lives, we have a tremendous sense of agency. We feel that we make decisions. We decide what to eat and what to wear and how to drive and whether or not to donate our organs and how to save for retirement and all kind of decisions like that. But if you take these results seriously, what they suggest is that yes, we make decisions, but the people who design the forms in which we make decisions have a lot to say about our final decisions. The people who design the environment in which we make decisions have a lot to do with how our final decisions would actually look like. And we call this choice architecture. And again, how much role do we have to play and how much is the environment in which we're being placed has to do with what decisions we make. We tend to view it as our decisions, but I would like you to consider the possibility the environment in which we make decisions has a much larger role and much larger role that we give it credit. The second thing to point out is that, of course, defaults, the path of least resistance, what has been pre-filled for us, is going to be incredibly important for decisions that we don't pay attention to. If you get a 7-page legal document and you read only the first page, whatever is set up in page 2 to 7 is going to be carried out for you automatically without you paying attention. But as decisions get bigger, as they become more complex, they also become more difficult. And as they become more difficult, when we face them, we do what? We do nothing. We take the path of least resistance. And this is why defaults are not just important for things we don't pay attention to, they're also important for very important decisions. Because as decision gets bigger, we don't know what to do, we give up, we do nothing, and we let the person who designed the form to decide for us.